welcome to my presentation on interviewing at accounting firms. So my copyright and disclaimer notice, this presentation is copyright 2008 to 2021 by Bennett Tchaikovsky and is for educational purposes only. The opinions herein are those of the author only and not the author's employers, including but not limited to the South Orange County Community College District and Irvine Valley College. This presentation may contain references to third-party websites and/or materials, collectively content. The author makes no claim to the content whatsoever, and the usage of this content is for educational purposes only. Okay, so this is going to be talking about before the interview. And this particular, basically this particular video is really going to be talking about what type of due diligence do you need to do. Now, due diligence is a term that is commonly like thrown around. You'll hear people kind of go through and say it, but really what is due diligence? It's what they define it as reasonable steps taken by a person in order to satisfy a legal requirement, especially in buying or selling something, a comprehensive appraisal of a business undertaken by a prospective buyer, especially to establish its assets and liabilities and evaluate its commercial potential. So what we're going to be talking about today is doing your due diligence, but for an employment side, meaning that what is it that you're going to need to do to basically be successful prior to interviewing with an accounting firm. Okay, so let's talk about the interview preparation. So first off, there's going to be a lot of different types of questions that you will not want to ask during an interview. And some of these questions might be like, oh, what does an accounting firm do? What that really shows is that you have not taken any time whatsoever in exploring what the firm that you're interviewing with does. The goal of this presentation here today is to help you go through and how do you go through and make those initial due diligence quests. The other thing too is with regards to interview preparation, I'm actually giving this presentation in a few weeks, but what we're going to want to go through and do is practice, practice, practice. You want to practice interviewing, you want to practice walking around and having conversations. My cats are about to become certified public accountants because I lecture to them all the time in the house. The other thing too is that if you do your diligence and you know things about the accounting firm that will impress employers. For example, if you know that a certain accounting firm does not audit publicly traded companies, the fact that you know that kind of information will be very, very important to you. And it's also about knowing who you're speaking with. We live in a very large world, but it's also a very small world because we live in Orange County near Disneyland. I'm just kidding. That's my dad humor for the day. No, but we want to know who we're talking to. What is their background, right? Before I go into that interview, what can I learn about the person that I'm going to be meeting with? Where did they go to college? Where did they go to undergraduate school? Where did they get their CPA license? What is their work experience be? And we can actually do a lot of that through LinkedIn. It's also too about understanding how the hiring process works with accounting firms. And I'm going to spend a separate video on that because that's just something that you really should know. I've written a few articles about it, but I'll do a video which kind of goes through and highlights those. Now, in terms of the questions not to ask or questions to not ask, is that I do not ever want to be going through and saying, what's the salary? Now, at some point in time, you can ask that question, but not on your earlier interviews. Similarly, what are the benefits? What's the vacation policy or paid time off? And what you have to be really careful about is you don't want to focus on like, what am I going to be getting? When you're going through and doing the initial interview, right, you're really kind of seeing, is this like the right place for me to work? And is this going to be a good fit for me for a period of time? Okay. So it's also over here too, what is the big four? If you ask somebody what the final four is or the big four, it's not a good thing. And that answer is EY, PwC, KPMG, and Deloitte. And I've actually heard of students during Meet the Firm say, what's the big four? If you don't know something, try to ask a mentor or somebody else rather than an employer, just to make sure that you're going through and realizing it. So the other part of this too is that political, religious, personal, we live in a very polarized society. And there's clearly a lot of different, I'm pretty apolitical. I make fun of both sides because it's entertaining. But, everybody has different views on religions and also different personal beliefs. And I would really keep those things to yourself. Okay. Now, in some cases, if you went to BYU and you are Mormon, that's different. Okay. And I'll talk, if you want to contact me, I'll tell you more about that. But that is a very, very special place to go for accounting. And if you happen to be Mormon and you graduate, and I believe it's the Marriott School of Business, that's like the #1 accounting school in the country. And that network is pretty insane. So if that's something that you have an access to, that's the one time where I would maybe talk a little bit more about the religious side of things. So, but let's go over here. So we're going to do our due diligence, right? And we're not buying something, but we're really trying to go through and to figure out what we're going to do. So the due diligence I'm showing you here is a partial list, and this is to get you going. Okay, so let's go through and take a look at these individually. State licensing websites, okay? And when we go, and I'm talking about state licensing websites, I'm talking about the state of California. If somebody is licensed as a CPA in California, they will be on this website. So let's go through and kind of check this out. So we're going to go ahead and look somebody up, and we'll do somebody else other than myself. Let's just go ahead and look up Scott London. Okay, and when I look up Scott London, what you're going to see right over here, and Scott, I've actually spoken with him before. He is actually nice, even though he pretty much brought down KPMG or got them in a lot of trouble. But right over here, you'll basically see somebody's license. So as you're looking at this over here, what you can kind of go through and do is see, well, what is their, where are they from? So when you're interviewing with an accounting firm, my suggestion to you is to go look at some of the principles of the particular firm. So as you're kind of going through and doing this, the other thing we can also go through and do as well is we can also look up firm names. Okay, so if I type Murphy, and let's just try Murphy. Okay, Murphy and Accounting Corporation. So as I look at this over here, right, this basically tells us that this one here, Murphy, this was canceled. They probably canceled it and they reformed it. And you can kind of tell by the dates over here, they probably reformed as an accounting corporation. And this tells you over here about the firm. So this is probably a pretty good place to kind of go through and look at, and their license is clear. They are licensed to practice as a corporation, accounting corporation in California. Why does this become so important? Why is this something that we want to go through and do? Well, if I go over here and I take a look at Scott London. Okay, so Scott London got in trouble. Okay, and if you type in his name, and he's since kind of gone through and done a couple different things, but you'll basically see over here, he was a partner at KPMG and he was sentenced for insider trading. He was giving tips to some golf buddies. And so that gets you in jail, and it really got his firm in trouble, right? So right over here, basically pleaded insider trading, and he's embarrassed and ashamed, and he's gone on and he's done some speaker tours. But as you come over here and you look at this for Scott London, you'll notice here his license was surrendered, meaning he gave it up. Over here, you'll notice like basically this experience completed is an A. What does that mean? Is that what he got on as, did he get that as a grade? No, it means that he was able to sign off on accounting engagements as an audit partner. And what you'll find is someone will either have an A or a G. A G basically means they're generally licensed to practice accounting with the exception of performing audits. And you can also look here, oh, CPA public enforcement documents. If I come over here and look, and I go over here to the CBA website, and I want to look at public enforcement documents, I can type in here, Scott London. And when I type in his name, I see over here, I'm going to find basically that basically accusation and decision. So this will tell me more about the firm. Now, most of the time that most of the people that you're looking at are not going to have anything like this. So this is a whole thing that happened when he was serving as a partner and he's done his time. He's been out of the accountancy profession for a while, but it's important to know, why is this so important? Why am I showing this? Because you have to make sure that when you're talking to somebody or when you're interviewing with somebody, before you walk in there, if their license is suspended or if they've got some other kind of stuff going on and you don't want to get involved with accounting after dark, it might be a good idea to walk away. So again, that's why it's so important to understand how the firm is actually being licensed, right? That's how we want to go through and do. So, and again, over here too, we can also see that with, let's go back to Scott. His license was issued in 1986. So Scott London has been auditing now for the better, or he's had his license for quite some time before it was pulled, okay, or before he surrendered his license. Okay, so that is licensing. And again, you want to make sure that before you're going into that interview, is the person actually licensed as a CPA? Now, if they're licensed in Oregon, what are you going to have to go through and do? Well, if they're in Oregon, I might have to come up here and look. If I do a license lookup, I can look up the license of a CPA. It's in pretty much all 50 states, you're going to be able to find if someone is actually a CPA. So those are things to take a look at. During a class, somebody had me look at one of the candidates, and we looked them up, and I think it was like in Illinois, and this dude was like licensed back in 30 or 40 years ago. Okay, so that's what we're going to go through and look at when we look at the license, basically the state licensing websites. That's the first place we can go. The next place we can go through and look at is going to be sec.gov. This is by far the place you need to be spending time on. I do it in class, but it's by far the most important thing to be looking at, okay? And why is that? Because if a company is publicly traded, right? If you ask the question, what is a publicly traded company? What does that mean? It means that they sell stock on the NASDAQ, right? They can sell their stock to the public. If you're selling your shares to the public, guess what? You have to get an audit done, right? So as we go through and look at this, right? So for example, if you're interested in Facebook, right? That's something you want to do. And you want to learn more about Facebook, and especially who audits Facebook. How do I find out that information? So if I come over here to sec.gov and I type in FB, okay, basically what does that stand for? That is Facebook. I have separate videos on how to look up the ticker symbols of publicly traded companies. You can find those on my YouTube channel. If I come over here to the 10K, right? What exactly is a 10K? A 10K is the annual report. But in this annual report, so say if I'm really interested in Facebook, and this is a client that I would love to work on, and I come over here to financial statements and supplementary data. This is item 8 on the 10K. When I click on this here, this is going to take me to the report of the independent registered public accounting firm. So right over here, right, when I look at this right over here, I see that, oh, basically right over here, that I look at this company right over here, and let me go back to this as I magnified it. I'm now just screwed it up. And let's just keep going down and down and down. Here we go. Okay. So right over here, it's Ernst & Young, and this is in Redwood City. right? So if I was working at the Irvine office of Ernst & Young and I said to me, aside of the, hey, to the hiring manager, I said, hey, I want to work on Facebook. And they would look at me and they say, well, Bennett, you're not going to be a part of the social network from this office. Why is it? Because the EY office in Redwood City is the one that goes through and audits Facebook. Okay, so it's a really important distinction that when you're looking up publicly traded companies, if you're going to be an auditor or if you want to have a certain client, this is going to be the best way to go through and to look up this information. Okay, so again, right over here, basically, who's the auditor for Tesla? Let's go check it out. So when I look up Tesla right over here, what I find is, oh, it's PricewaterhouseCoopers out of San Jose, California. So they're the auditors of Tesla. If I want to work on Tesla, if I want to be a part of their audit team, it's not going to happen in Irvine. It's going to happen up in Northern California. But again, it's important for you to know that when you're talking to the accounting firms, if you know who their clients are, is that going to be impressive? Absolutely, yes. Over here, this is just something I did a quick search on. This is basically, for Big Four, this is PwC clients of 2020. Again, these are all publicly traded companies, right? So this is all going to be listed out over here. So all of this information is publicly available. Who audits Disney? It's PwC, right? So again, when you're going through and doing this, right, before you go on interviews, if you know about the clients of your firms that happen to be publicly traded, is that going to be very impressive? And the answer is yes. So again, spend the time and know who are the clients that the accounting firm you're going to be auditing is going to be looking at. Now, here's a fun one. This is a publicly traded, this is a firm that actually happens to be, this is an accounting firm that's publicly traded. So if you wanted to learn a lot about how something happens, so CBIZ, they are an accounting firm and they happen to be traded on the New York Stock, I think they're on the NYSE. So they're basically traded on the New York Stock Exchange as a publicly traded company, right? So right over here is the name of the exchange. The more time you spend on this website looking up publicly traded companies and spending the time looking at the filings and about these different companies that interest you, the better off you're going to be when it comes into interviews. Doesn't matter if it's for Big Four or for anything else. The more time you spend on public filings, the better off you're going to be. Okay, so that is sec.gov. The last part over here I didn't show you is SEC enforcement. Okay, so again, if you are concerned with basically over here about different, accounting firms, right? Over here, it's like I can find, it's like, all right, here are the different, here's an action against Victoria Chan Esquire. Let's see if we can find a CPA who got popped. Okay. Oh, here we go. Right, I'm not even gonna try Craig Golding. So if we look over here at this firm, right, take a look at this. So over here, we can see that basically the audit of Longfin Corp and over here. And so you can see that they had some problems, okay? So when you go through and you look at this, right, what you want to really be sure that you're doing, again, if I'm working for a firm that has problems with a Securities and Exchange Commission, right, you do not want to be, that's something you just don't want to deal with, right? Remember, if you commit a federal crime, you're going to do the time. It's not worth it. If you're starting at a firm that they're like under investigation by the SEC, IRS, something like that, that's probably not a good place for you to start your career. So again, you just want to go through and check it. Sure, it's all going to be okay, but you never know. Now, PCAOB. What's a PCAOB? It sounds like, Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. So this was established as a result of Sarbanes-Oxley. So this was back in 2002. What does the PCAOB do? They are the auditors that audit the auditors. So if you go here to their website and you take a look, basically right over here at this website, you're going to find a lot of information about the firms. Now, what's interesting is that if you, and again, this is going to apply if a accounting firm audits publicly traded companies. That's the most important part of this. If they audit publicly traded companies. So if we look at this over here, this is the report on PricewaterhouseCoopers. And if you look at this, did they find deficiencies? Oh yeah, they found deficiencies. Okay, so doesn't mean it's, and if you kind of go through the report, this is probably not something you want to talk about on their interview with PwC unless you really want to piss them off. But it's important that you understand if somebody's auditing publicly traded companies, you want to understand, well, when they got reviewed, what did that look like? Okay, and the PCAOB does those reviews. Okay, so that's a Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. Okay, and now we're moving into the more fun ones. Okay, so what are the fun ones? Glassdoor. Ooh, Glassdoor. What is Glassdoor? It's when employees get pissed off and they decide to go start writing stuff about the firms. So let's take a look at some of these. So here we have one for Murphy 3. And when you look at this, again, don't take one review right at its face, on its face, right over here. You know, like what are some of the basically great family from staff to partners. You feel comfortable with talking to anyone and can really learn a lot. Limited full-time opportunities, so don't go to the internship anticipating an offer at the end. So again, this is coming from a tax intern. They really liked it, but they basically said over here, it's like, you know, I'm not going to be able to get a full-time job out of it, but it's good for labor. Right over here, again, an intern. Now, when you see these things on Glassdoor, what you can say is like if you're doing the interview, is you can say, hey, you know, I looked at Glassdoor. It looks like, what are your thoughts on some of the feedback that people were leaving? I would be a little bit careful about doing it. I would just kind of use this more of just kind of like trying to figure out what's happening at the firm, right? So again, you see kind of like a repetitive thing, like rarely an opportunity to intern become full-time employee. So again, watch it in terms of, you know, like over here, wages are on the lower side of internships. So just know what you're getting into. It's not that it's going to be necessarily be a bad experience, right? Over here, Eide Bailly. Okay, so Eide Bailly, big term field, busy season, expect to work long hours, right? So if I look at the reviews, I go through and look at the reviews. Now, you also have to be careful too, because some of these reviews may be coming from all over the world. So make sure it's for the particular office that you're looking at. Over here, PricewaterhouseCoopers, right? Again, you see like these different reviews, low salary for graduate students. So you'll see this like, again, it's common things, but you kind of know what you're getting into, right? You want to become a licensed CPA, you got to pay the time. Okay, IVC. Even we have reviews. Now, as you're looking at these different reviews, the reason why this becomes so important is because when you start auditing clients, is it important that you know who the client is? And the answer is absolutely yes. And Glassdoor can kind of give you some insights in who the client is and might actually go to some potential problems. There was an accounting firm that when I was serving on a board, there was an accounting firm we were looking at, and there were some comments in Glassdoor that were not good. And that actually caused us not to go through and to use that accounting firm. So you want to kind of really make sure that as you're going through this, kind of take it with a grain of salt, but it has some really good information. And again, you're trying to figure out as much information as you can about the firm before you walk in. Now, LinkedIn, very, very important website. So you need to be on LinkedIn, okay? I generally connect with my students, and if you connect with me, what I'm going to tell you is that I have a lot of connections. So if you looked at my LinkedIn account, I have roughly about almost 1,600 connections. And you can see some of my former students like Evan, who's awesome. He's right now at Haskell and White. And so he's moving up the ranks. And so as you kind of go through and look at this, right, if you're connected with me and you say to me like, Bennett, by the way, I'm going to be making this video public. If you take one of my classes, I will connect with you. But if not, do not be offended by that. So it's really about how are you related. So if you see if you're one of my students and you see somebody at a firm that you want to be introduced to who's related to one of my contacts, call me up. Say, hey, Bennett, I really want an introduction to this person that you know at this firm. And I'm more than happy to do so. Okay, but do not contact that person directly, right? If you're not directly connected with them and say, hey, I know Tchaikovsky, go in. No, do not do that, right? But what you want to be doing is you want to be using LinkedIn to see the type of people that you're going to be interviewing with. If their experience and positions are public, then you also want to be looking at that as well. So again, LinkedIn, extremely important, right? And again, this is something you want to be going through and doing prior to starting up your, as you're going through, prior to your interview, you need to know who are you interviewing with? What is their background? For example, I had a student who was interviewing at a firm for a tax position. And she said to me, Bennett, she said, this partner is an LLM. What's an LLM? Well, an LLM is a master's in taxation. And so I was able to help her get more information about the places she was going to go and basically interview with. And so I think that ultimately helped her. Okay, so right over here, finra.org, calbar.gov. Okay, so there are a lot of informational websites. Okay, so for example, if I look at FINRA, this is the Financial Industry, basically regulatory authority, right? So they are basically the ones who look at brokers. When you're looking at brokers, right? And if they have any kind of things against them, it's going to show up on this website. So if somebody used to be a securities dealer, if they're, whatever they might be, that's something you want to look at who they are. Another one you can go to is calbar.org. So in addition to the licensing for states, okay, so right over here, we've got Michael Avenatti. Michael Avenatti, attorney for Stormy Daniels, right over here. So ineligible to practice law, consumer alert. So if you're dealing with attorneys, this is a place where you can go through and look, right? But again, what is the most important of all this, of everything we're kind of talking about here? It's really doing your diligence, right? It's about how do we go through and how do we figure out who we are dealing with? What is it about this firm? And you want to spend your time doing this because the more you prepare for your interview, right, it's going to basically, if I'm sitting there and say, well, I got to go interview with this firm today, if I don't do anything, I'm going to start getting nervous. But if I go through and do these different types of my due diligence by going through and looking at these different resources, that's really going to help me better prepare for the actual interview. It's also, remember, you are interviewing them as just as much as they are interviewing you. So that's part one of basically my interview preparation. I will probably go through and do another one of these videos, but I want to thank you for watching my video here, and it's way too long, but it's always cool, right? Because I gotta go more than 10 minutes on a public YouTube video that violates every single rule. But hopefully you found this video helpful, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And I always sound better in 1.75 speed. Have a great one, and I'll see you soon. Take care.